Wagner chief Yevgeny Prigozhin. Uh, what is to come of this recent episode? Um, so, Prigozhin, I would say, has been put down, and the episode will uh, probably resolve itself in um, some kind of exile in the old Roman sense. Prigozhin may, perhaps stay in Belarus. And um, after the little berserker episode, uh, the courageous soldiers of Wagner will be absorbed into a new structure of command. So, not to say necessarily dissolved, but somehow absorbed under the uh, military um, of Russia. Um, so, the issue was apparently that Prigozhin, who is something of a paranoiac and at the same time somehow sincere, but at the same time somehow scheming, um, has been for several months producing these very sharp criticisms of the Russian military generals, of especially he cites out two for very great abuse, Shogu and um, Gerasimov. So uh, uh, again, this incident, I think, we're in this sort of tempo of comic catastrophe, where it's quickly going to come to this end not in a bang but in a whimper. But what were the causes of it? So there's some opacity here. So we have this difference in two cultures. The Wagner Group, and the Russian military, and these constant Prigozhin, who has self-identified with Robin Hood, with the English medieval Robin Hood, who was running around while Richard the Lionhearted was fighting other Christians on his way to the Crusades. Um, has made numerous criticisms which therefore draw forth this statement Putin is making. So Putin is very clear. He repeats 3 times, as though catechizing us, that we're dealing here with people that will be punished, with people that must, as it were, cease and desist, realize their error, and that we're dealing with what he calls the knife in the back, and what he also calls. So there's a statement in English on the Kremlin website. So these are the exact phrases. So he also speaks of the armed mutiny. So the armed mutiny is a stab in the back. So these are very clear terms. the lingering doubt I have is this: I do not know where Prigozhin and his uh, screeds against the Russian military is. Um, One version is this: he's a very cunning man, and his plan is uh, to be a kind of Lenin. So Putin has made this metaphor concerning the period of anarchy in the World War I period that will speak on behalf of the people as against the Tsar. So the Tsar would then be um, both um, the Russian military, which is very hierarchical by comparison to the Wagner Group, which is much more, if you like, egalitarian, much less respecting of badges, if you like. And in terms of the plutocratic oligarchs who he alleges, in some versions, in the most extreme and exaggerated versions, who have only started the war with Ukraine in order to plunder it, and who are absolutely identical to the Western Dajjal, as it were. These accounts are incredible because they simply dissolve the differences between a culture which, so Nicholas Berdyaev tells us that the first Marxist was a Russian landowner owner from the steppes, by which I believe he means from Siberia somewhere, who was in Paris and who already, when Marx was still very young and exercising a very great influence in Paris, after finishing his university days in Prussia, already before 1850, immediately after the 1848 revolutions, has become the center of this movement, which is funded for the rest of his life by Engels, and which attracts many accolades. So Russians have seen, according to Nicholas Berdyaev, at this time already, that there must be some way to escape what they saw at that time in full force, the Biedermeier period, the beginning of the bourgeois, which then becomes the globalist in our own time. The bourgeois meaning not the capitalist, not the owner, but rather the middle class, something more like, this is a much larger issue than what we get. So in something like the fat cats as against the forgotten men in the Roosevelt era, which is often sort of given as the analogy with Bismarck's bringing in of the state socialism in Prussia in the 1870s, is at a delay of 60 years then to Roosevelt's policies, which are very similar. But this is not absolutely identical, but there's a great deal of similarity in that the czars who were executed along with their family, the Romanovs, appear like the fat cats in the light of these constant assassination attempts, which went on for 30, 40, 50 years, already in Dostoevsky's time, until finally this successful one. So in this sense, you could think, okay, Prigozhin thinks here's the Russian people who know what they want, and maybe what they want is to kill the Tsar. So this is exactly what Dugin says also. If the Russian people want to kill the Tsar, they'll rise up and kill the Tsar. Otherwise, give the Tsar the power that he needs as supreme military commander of the country, supreme um, executive and head of the military in the country. Um, so this is the position which seems to show in some way the most sense of how things move um, in Rus, as it were. So Dugin has this sense. Maybe Prigozhin has this sense also. So maybe Prigozhin is very paranoid. He thinks people are shorting him ammunition and so on. Maybe he was lying and just said that in order to have a cause belli, a cause of just war against our bellum, a cause of just war against the Tsar and his lawyers. So, or maybe it's a mixture of both. But so the last thing that happened seemed to me like this is about a month ago. There's more and more extreme remarks about the cemetery and the battlefield and the corpses out on the battlefield and how look at the Russian generals who don't care that they're using their men as meat and so on. Out of Prigozhin's mouth, especially again against these two generals in particular, never, I believe, so far as I know, never against Putin directly. And then there was probably Putin decided he's tired of Prigozhin. Prigozhin is too loudly barking dog. And he puts down this, or maybe more subtly, he just wants to put Prigozhin on notice. You have to fall into line. That could have been. He puts down this stipulation that the Wagner Group is going to have to sign some contracts with the Russian military, and basically the Russian military will get to decide who's the head of Wagner Group and therefore remove Prigozhin if he steps out of line. So that was supposed to happen. July was the end date for him to sign that. So then we see something happened. He goes into this town a little bit on the Black Sea, a little bit east, northeast of Crimea. So I think it's just so Dugin has said Tarkovsky, the Russian director, is pretentious because he's not in line with reality in a certain way. But Tarkovsky has shown in his Andrei Rublev this wonderful line of the Mongol, of the Tartar, who comes in and says and sees the picture of the Virgin Mary giving birth and says strange things happen in Rus.